Actually, the twist in M. Night Shyamalan's The Village is great. It's capital G great. The Village, it's 20 years old now. I was there in the summer of 2004. I was in high school. I was obsessed with movies, and I was obsessed with M. Night Shyamalan. And I was there to witness people whose reaction to The Village was basically to start a riot over how much they hated the movie, and specifically the ending. They all had the exact same complaint. The twist ending is stupid. Emphasis on the word stupid. Roger Ebert gave this movie 1 star, and in his review, he says, I'm going to read from his review. He says, quote, "The Village is a colossal miscalculation, a movie based on a premise that cannot support it, a premise so transparent it would be laughable were the movie not so deadly solemn. It's a flimsy excuse for a plot with characters who move below the one-dimensional and enter flatland. Critics were enjoined after the screening to avoid revealing the plot secrets. That is not because we would spoil the movie for you. It's because if you knew them, you wouldn't want to go. The whole enterprise is a shaggy dog story, and in a way, it is all secrets. I can hardly discuss it at all without being maddeningly vague." End quote. I love that review. I love Roger Ebert. Imagine how unhappy Ebert would be having to write about movies today in this spoiler-phobic climate. But when that movie came out, and because of that Ebert review and all the other reviews, I didn't see The Village. But I wish I had, because I disagree with everything Ebert says. I love The Village. Shyamalan, unfortunately, he was the victim of his own success in terms of branding. The Sixth Sense had such an iconic twist ending, maybe the iconic twist ending of the decade or even longer. Unbreakable also had its own twist of sorts, but I actually don't like the word twist. I think it's a little reductive. I think in these cases, I would say it clarifies what you're watching. Like in both movies, some information is revealed late in the movie, and then it gives you the clarity to understand everything you've been watching. It makes you put words to what you could detect was there all along. Deepens the themes, and then makes you sort of recontextualize everything you've seen to align with the new information that you have. And The Village does the same thing, and its big reveal, I think, actually makes the movie so much more interesting when you watch it a second time. But I'll hold off on discussing the twist of The Village for a moment, just in case you haven't seen the movie and you don't want it spoiled. Shyamalan is one of the best directors in the world at using the just classic tools of cinema, the nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes of cinema to create the sensation of dread. The way he controls the camera to create dread, and especially his use of sound. They are so masterful. Like it makes even his bad movies compelling. It makes me want to give them a chance. And I'm an unapologetic Shyamalan fan. I like most of his movies. So take this with a grain of salt when I say that I believe he's in top form in The Village. And it's not necessarily a scary movie, but it's a very like moody and dreary and creepy movie. And you feel the dread and the creep and the moodiness before you can even put words to why you feel it's there. All right, spoiler alert. So The Village opens in a village at a funeral. The gravestone indicates that the year is 1897, but we see the village, we see its inhabitants, and they don't look like it's 1897. It looks more like this is 1697. These villagers, they identify themselves as settlers. They've settled in the area, but we don't get much more information than that. Like, what part of the country is this? Where are they coming from? What are they rejecting? Are they a cult? Are they a religious group? Are they a political group? Is this a commune? The movie doesn't say yet. You see the date is 1897, but this doesn't look like 1897 because like you know that like in 1897, yeah, it was a long time ago, but there were still like tall buildings and automobiles and even the first movies. So that alone makes you feel uneasy. Like, what am I watching here? Okay, the town is ruled by a council of elders. Their leader is Edward Walker, and he's played by William Hurt, and he appears to be the founder of the town. You've also got Sigourney Weaver and Brendan Gleeson and Cherry Jones. This is a wonderfully deep cast. These characters are all alluding to past trauma without explaining what trauma it is, and they speak in this sort of slightly elevated, theatrical, formal English. They rarely use contractions, and they've set up this community as a refuge to escape from the traumas of the modern world. And then this village, it's surrounded by woods, which are supposedly inhabited by monsters. They call the monsters those we don't speak of. And they have like ceremonies and rituals to protect the border of their village from intrusion by the monsters of the woods. They enlist their kids because they're having kids and raising a new generation that has only known this world to participate in the rituals to keep out the monsters. But spoiler alert again, there are no monsters. And also the year is 2004. So it's not 1897, it's 2004. The elders are all people who have left modernity behind to live as if this were some sort of hallowed time from the past. They have children, they're raising their children with these superstitions, with this fear, and protecting / shielding them from the outside world. Don't tell their kids where they've come from. And the elders will even dress up as monsters to perpetuate the myth of the monsters and use fear to keep the kids in line. And you actually see a monster 30 minutes into the movie, and it's a little jarring because you know how horror movies work. You're like, I shouldn't be seeing this soon into the movie. And also, why does the monster look like that? Like, it's creepy, but also looks kind of chintzy. And once you know what you're looking at, like, it's all the creepier because you're like, Jesus, what these people are doing. It's so fucked up if you think about it. But people hated this twist. Like, the critique went something like, M. Night thought of a cool ending, or he's like, whoa, that'd be cool if like it was actually modern, but you thought it wasn't, and then constructed a flimsy plot to lead you to that. But I think that's totally wrong. Putting aside the twist for a second, it's Shyamalan's most restrained film. Like, the camera doesn't move that much. The takes are very long. The actors are usually kept at a distance, full body shots, very remote, very formal, very off-putting. Before you know something's wrong, you feel something is wrong. And people complained at the time about how slow this movie is. I'm a fan of slow horror, but I get why they say that, because the plot doesn't necessarily move at a breakneck pace. This is a movie that lingers in the dread, in the eeriness, and like, that's just very much my shit. But it also makes you want to see that there's actually a lot to recommend about the village. Like, the people are generally happy, and Shyamalan makes a point of showing the physical connection these people have when they talk to each other. They're usually like holding hands or holding each other's hands, like permanent handshake as they talk to each other, just to show you like they have intimate connections with each other. This is a very interconnected community. It's a community that we don't really have in the world anymore, but I think we all have sort of the innate desire for it. But the twist, and again, I don't like calling it a twist, and elements of it are sort of doled out very deliberately throughout the movie. Like, it's only basically an hour in when William Hurt reveals to his daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, that the monsters are fake. And it's not long after that we find out that this is the modern world, not the world of 100 years ago. So there's many different ways to read The Village. An obvious way is this is a 9/11 movie. This is a movie about America and the many different ways Americans responded to the trauma of 9/11. Now, I'm not saying the movie has characters who are literally responding to 9/11. I'm saying we're grafting that feeling onto them. The characters experience a trauma and a loss, and their response is they opt out of society altogether and go build something new, and something that they have a lot more control over, and something that they can keep all the unwanted, unpleasant feelings out of. The movie has a feeling of melancholy and mourning, so it's very easy to see the 9/11 response into it. You can go deeper. You can put specific political forces onto the characters of the elders. So I'm reading a book about the Iraq War right now. When I watched this movie earlier today, all I could think was the elders, William Hurt, these are the Bush administration. Like, they're building up the ultimate boogeyman in the monsters in the woods / Saddam Hussein and his mythical weapons, because they want to scare the kids and make them think we have no choice but to go to war. We need to go to war to protect what we've built here. You can see these characters are conservative reactionaries. They talk of the towns, and they're talking about big cities. They're echoing like a classic conservative fear of big cities, especially big, diverse cities. They want to raise their kids in an environment that they can control. All of this is being funded by William Hurt's character, who is like the heir to $1 billion fortune. You find out that he owns all of the land of the woods and the wildlife preserve that surrounds the woods. He bribes the government to keep planes from flying over, and he pays park rangers to patrol the borders of the woods so that nobody goes in or gets out. And it's like a testament to the reality that the super wealthy can create for themselves, and that they can force others to live in. But the reverse of all this, what makes this movie so rich, I think, is that you can also sympathize with the villagers and you think about the choices that you make if you raise kids. I have kids. Everybody who's raising kids is choosing to raise them a certain way, or maybe you're not even conscious of the choices you're making, but you're raising them in a certain way. And by doing that, it means we're denying them all the other ways that they could be living. Like almost all kids speak the same language as their parents. They live roughly in the same place as their parents their whole lives. There's actually not a lot of mobility. They have the same religion and same political beliefs as their parents. They make similar amounts of money as their parents did. And like kids don't ask to be raised this way. It just happens. Now, obviously there's exceptions to all of that, but for the most part, people just kind of inherit the lives that their parents lived. It's not a perfect movie. I like Shyamalan as a director more than I do as a writer. As a writer, I think he has a tendency to make things a little too pat and to over-explain. And I really hate everything involving Adrian Brody's character in this movie. So it's not a perfect movie, but it's a movie that I really do love. But one final thing, there's a criticism of this movie that I will flat out reject. And it's when people say that this movie doesn't make sense or that its twist isn't plausible. To me, that is something I just could not care less about. Like, if the filmmaking is winning me over, then I'm not going to think about how plausible it is that William Hurt can create a nature preserve and keep planes from flying overhead and all of that. Like, the filmmaking should be engrossing me enough that I'm not asking those questions. So if I am asking those questions, it's the fault of the filmmaker for not making an engrossing enough movie. But I never want to be thinking whether something makes sense in the real world. I want something to make emotional sense within itself, but it doesn't need to make like plausible real world sense. Okay, what do you think of The Village? Do you like the twist? Do you like M. Night's twists in general? And where does this stack up for you in M. Night Shyamalan's filmography?